Welcome everybody for Roundtable number 2. This is the second episode of this Roundtable. Again, this idea is to gather smart minds from various ecosystems to discuss the hot topics of the industry. And today we'll be talking about security in the large aspect. So we have the very chance to have a lot of very cool guests. So starting from my right, we have Jason from Zama. We have Carolina from Ledger. We have, actually, let's have everybody to introduce themselves. So feel free to just do a very quick intro of yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jason, working for Zama. So for those who don't know, Zama is a company developing FHE, new cryptographic technique. And our goal is to bring a confidentiality layer on top of existing blockchain. And I'm the ecosystem lead. So basically the guy trying to explain to a broader audience what it is and what are the use cases. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Hello everyone, I'm Carolina. I'm working for Ledger. Ledger is a hardware wallet company, and I'm doing a PhD there with Telecom Paris on the blockchain client security. Happy to be here.
Hi, I'm Nanak. I'm one of the founders of Holonym. Holonym builds human technology to bring digital rights to people via cryptography. So right to privacy, right to security, and economic freedom. And thank you so much for having us. For having to be here.
Yeah, so I'm Lothing. I lead Starknet France, so the French ecosystem of Starknet, which is basically the largest ecosystem of developers on Starknet worldwide. We are so basically doing a lot of ecosystem work, and with Jonas from Mina, we lead Roundtable. It's a very initiative, and we are super happy to have you guys.
Yes, thank you very much for being with us today. It's really exciting to be here and talking about this topic. The first month, was about the topic of scalability and how to actually scale decentralized systems. And today we'll talk about the other end of the trilemma, the security aspect. Quite interesting. And I'm Yunus from Mina Foundation. I do software development for ZK applications. Thank you.
Hey, good to see you all. My name is Jan from Oak Security. We do cybersecurity for Web3. We have a lot of experience in Rust and Go. It started all 7 years ago under the brand Solidified. So we've also audited a couple of virtual machines, infrastructure, bridges, middleware, smart contracts, strong focus on DeFi as well.
I'm Nadim. I'm also working in security audits at Cure53 and Symbolic software. Lots of work as well on auditing everything from password managers to VPNs, smart contract layers, decentralized financial systems, and all of that. Lots of applied cryptography implementations, and done a bunch of audits over the years.
Actually, you brought up security as one of the piece of the famous blockchain trilemma. I actually don't really like security to be involved in this. I don't see whatever. That's another topic. But maybe let's get started. We have a lot of security to be a lot of security actors to discuss. Maybe one of the first questions unless you guys have one specific question, one things to begin with. Maybe we can just start with some kind of a broad question, like what are the unique challenges, properties to the decentralized ecosystem in the perspective of security.
So I wanted to ask the fellow from Holonym, you work on ZKID, right? Which is, correct me if I'm mistaken, the employment of zero-knowledge proof technology to facilitate identification, proving things about yourself. So I think that when zero-knowledge proofs were first introduced and popularized decades ago, this was basically one of the things that people were excited about. And intuitively, to me, it seems like one of the most exciting and also obvious applications of zero-knowledge proofs. Being able to prove to a bar that you are of drinking age without revealing more about yourself, being able to cross a border without revealing additional information about yourself. This, to me, seems like a very great, useful, societally optimistic and positive contribution that zero-knowledge systems can bring. So that's very exciting. However, it really seems like attention has focused a lot on stuff that zero knowledge proof systems, at least initially, were not particularly well known for or seen as a potential catalyst for, like making blockchain execution private and stuff like that. Which yes, they work, and that's great, wonderful, very exciting. Going to make lots of money with meme coins and so on. But it seems like, first of all, slightly less obvious and more contrived than that use case. And also, to me personally, I don't really get excited about it that much. So how come ZKID and those sorts of use cases haven't seen the same level of excitement and push? Because I see them as way more socially compelling.
Yeah, that is a great question. The number one reason it seems is likely incentives, because there is a lot of money in building L1s with different architectures, or at least there has been for the past few years. So a lot of research, a lot of attention, both in terms of retail, in terms of investors, in terms of developers, has gone into the scalability side of things. And the second is, I would say also linked to this, the second is the readiness for deployment. Ironically, I think if the same amount of research and development went into ZK identity as it did in scalability, we would be miles ahead, because it's actually an easier problem to solve than scaling Ethereum. But that's not how the money has won, and the tooling is a little limited. So the major use cases of ZK would include compliance. I think there's a big thing on a bunch of people's wish lists, that you do KYC and your data is no longer in this honeypot of user data, where if you get a data breach later on, everybody's KYC info, their government ID picture, their name, their address, maybe their social security number if they're in the US, all that's leaked. Like, this is a big thing on people's wish list, and also even companies too. Like, companies don't like storing all user data. Like, we hear a lot about advertising, everybody wants the user data. Like, yes, that's true for certain types of user data in certain companies, but a lot of companies don't want to be storing sensitive data if they don't have to and they can't make money off of it. It's like a big overhead for them in terms of their security and compliance and all that. So there is a demand here, but getting to the level where, one, the technology is ready for it, because oftentimes regulators need to inspect the user data. They need to say, okay, this person did a ZK proof of their KYC, but now I want to know who they are because they were involved in a transaction with laundered money. And being able to respond to that needs more than just ZK. So it needs, and the tooling is here now for it. There are certain companies like us at Holonym and also ZK.me that have built these threshold networks for encrypting these data and making sure it can only selectively be revealed for appropriate regulatory requests and not just carte blanche surveillance. So this infrastructure has only been built in the past year or so to make compliance more feasible. And we are seeing an increase of these use cases, but I think it's a little bit less sexy as well than blockchain you can trade meme coins on.
Thank you for your answer. I'd like to just show a real-world example of usage of ZKID, and this is not something I saw on X or on the social network. So I went to Argentina in December to participate in a crecimiento pop-up city in Buenos Aires, yeah. And so they are using something called Quark ID. So I had to download the wallet, and so this is based on ZK. I don't know how it works, but that's what they told me. And so with this Quark ID stuff, here's the application. I have credential. It followed the VC credential, verifiable credential from Web3 for the foundation. And you can enter buildings just showing this without revealing who you are. And I've learned that civil servants in Argentina all use this to enter the buildings and to do many other things. So it already exists. It's just getting started. I also learned that in Georgia, the state of Georgia, they are using a ZK-based identity solution. So I'd like to have your feedback on these real-world use cases.
Yeah, absolutely. I think governments have been surprisingly receptive to this stuff. Probably more so than companies, because companies interested in compliance use cases are very hesitant to make sure, okay, this is a new thing, but we're doing compliance, we want to make sure, let's do this the standard way. Whereas governments are hey, look, we want to innovate here, especially smaller governments who want to be technologically competitive. So we've had conversations with governments as well who are interested in having more like interoperable and private IDs. There's definitely a lot of opportunity here for building in ZK, and there are so many governments that want better ID systems right now. I think one challenge there is standardization. At some point, like, for larger governments, we're going to need more standards, and ZKs, this might be another good conversation topic, actually, standardization of ZK, because, that's a difficult thing.
It's a war.
Yeah. It's a war, and we don't know who's going to win. It's a war between, like, dozens or maybe even more of proving systems.
It might also be too early to standardize some elements of ZK, given the productive nature of the research space in terms of performance improvements and simplification of the math.
If you let me, I want to add two stuff there. First of all, in terms of the reasons of why ZK is not used in privacy that much, I believe we should not ignore the fact that scalability is a huge concern there as well. In then, the only way of achieving privacy with ZK is through client-side execution, because in then ZK doesn't have fully privacy like FHE, but more it just gives privacy on the some properties of the input given. So you need to actually execute the code in the front end in the client device. And we are in an age, I think still some web developers are discussing if browsers are good enough for React and this type of stuff. I think executing ZK in a very mass level is still a question of scalability. So
Penumbra runs this wallet which executes everything client side, and it loads up the whole chain and does all the ZK stuff in a browser extension. It's like the ZK. Penumbra is a zero-knowledge powered, extremely private blockchain thing, very private. And if they can do that, I feel like you can do a range proof on an age, right?
Yeah, but it's browser, you're saying which browser? And in mobile phones it's possible because the most majority of internet is in mobile browsers. So
WebKit,
I don't know.
V8.
Honestly, I think it wasn't possible until recently because mobile phones have developed a lot in the recent years. So I think right now it's definitely possible, I know. But 5 years before or 10 years before, was it that possible? Mobile proving, client-side proving? I'm not sure. I think that's also a reason. And the second aspect of standardization, to come back to our topic, to me it seems that maybe the standardization can be a way of achieving more security in the client-side executing code. Because in that's one of the problems with having ZK applications. In order to make sure the code is secure, you need to actually read the code, audit the code, and even though we have great auditors, it's not always possible to audit something, especially if you are small or if you don't have the time. So can standardization be a way to avoid audits in small applications, small use cases? That can be a question.
One important aspect that we have to take into account, also answering your more general question, is this, any of those systems are Web3 systems are always a layer on top of the Web2 system, right? So that maybe goes back to your question, what are the differences? Is first of all, we have all the Web2 vulnerabilities basically, and then we decided somehow to empower the user, which is kind of a bad idea from a security perspective. And there are a lot of attacks that are related to operational security, like social scams. People give away their wallets. People might give away their IDs, and then you get into a zone where you really need to discuss. Okay, what should that ID be used for, and should it be used for everything? Can I steal someone's full identity, like their house, if I have their wallet? Or how do things work out here?
I also feel that there is some work to be done on before standardizing to develop really resistant code. Simply, I think about this tool that was released 3 months ago, Panelists, which is a fuzzer to fuzz. It was Polygon ZK rollup, and just with a fuzzer that was focused on finalization bugs, it found 12 0 days. So just with one research that focused on one type of vulnerability, we were able to find so many 0 days. So it just made me feel that we are still far from any standards protocol. They tested also this tool on other rollups, and there is still some work to do, and I wouldn't go for standardization right now. And I don't know, your project also showed that there is some work to do on that.
Then, like, to come back to the question, what are some like unique differences of this decentralized world, decentralized idea, than the centralized one? I think one to highlight was like the fact that we actually empower client, and yeah, that's like a huge step, because in that, like, there is no I forgot my password button anymore, or like it's really hard to implement. So and how to actually change this UX? So that's the question in terms of security. And what are some other aspects maybe that you can highlight about decentralization and centralization of security?
Yeah, actually, either like a world where you can some kind of get the best of the two worlds of like not giving the users the like or the power, or the responsibility of it, and in the same time, the analogy I can make is like on Starknet, for instance, like with like a kind of abstraction, you can like your wallet, you have a less, you cannot have this best of the two worlds by having ways to recover your wallets through others ways than just having a seed phrase. Like through having like, I don't know, let's say like a 2FA or whatever, like a passkey plus you can just whitelist wallets where to which you can whitelisting is something else, but like you can recover from very many ways. You can imagine any kind of design of ways to recover your wallet. So that's kind of a way to get the best of the two worlds. Either way, you can implement similar features to this, to the issue, to the question, to the issue of user identity in a way. I'm not to whom I'm asking the questions, so feel free to.
Yeah, I think to get the best of both worlds, I think there are two methods I see as being very promising. And I think both of them essentially involve sort of a 2 of 2 or 1 of n where one of the parties is the user. So for example, like either 2 out of 2 multisig or 2-party threshold signatures. For example, in Human Wallet, we develop, formerly known as Silk, we do a 2-party computation of the signature between the user and a server. And we did that because of what you mentioned, that like in the traditional finance world, users are logging in with like phone OTPs. Like this is the least secure authentication method, but people's funds are not stolen from their bank accounts. The reason why is because the bank does like 99% of the security, and they're checking the transactions, making sure that it's not dangerous.
They also have a legal responsibility in case of a breach, or they need to recover the money if there is an issue. So
yeah.
That's another aspect of the security.
Yeah, exactly. Like centralization has a lot of benefits to security. And I think if you can centralize the security without centralizing the key custody, which you can do with either account abstraction or MPC, then unfortunately, most account abstraction and MPC is not doing that today. But I really want this to be the direction where the space goes, where you have one key or one part of the key that the user has control over, only the user has control over, and one where a company has control over, so the company can do the security, but can't take the user's key.
And is there a specific design that you see from your perspective, proper to you?
So the design that I like the most and that we ended up going with was with just like the Lindell 17 2-party signing, because you don't have to deal with account abstraction that way. And you can have like the same wallet address on any chain, but you could also do the same thing with account abstraction if you want to be chain specific, or if you want to deal with like cross-chain stuff. You could do like a 2 out of 2 multisig on a safe.
So to speak to that, I think that Coinbase has really doubled down on that approach, because Lindell, the guy who wrote that thing, now works there and heads the MPC crypto team. And what they've done is that they've taken all of his MPC work and structured it across the entire thing such that they have the sort of equivalent to the central bank taking care of like 99% of security. But the way that I think that these exchanges are planning to do it is by having hardcore MPC everywhere and spreading the need for signatures across different hardware and also custodial frameworks and so on. And I think that Coinbase also might be working on open sourcing more tools for other companies and researchers and teams to implement similar technologies. So I think this might become a thing that everyone does.
That would be great.
Maybe also like to make this question, or maybe to troll this question a bit. I think the problem with like what's the best of both worlds question is like, whom do you want to be protected against, or what's your attack scenario, right? You have always to ask yourself that question, at least implicitly. Like if is the state the evil actor that kind of censors and you need to protect against? Is the SEC against you? Probably then the Coinbase approach is not the best. Or is it just the evil North Korean hackers we protect against? Or like who is really, or is it like the people who have so much money that they can easily buy all the stake and kind of compromise the whole network? Like I think to have like this, like a specific discussion, you always need a specific threat model. You cannot answer it like, because otherwise it's just a philosophical question. You end up in the situation where, okay, you have to be in a bunker and with like fully self-sustainable, only on your own.
Yeah, I agree, but like in a way, it's super innovative. It's super new. It's like basically like anything that is new. It's it's basically the unknown unknowns in a way. So you cannot really. There's always this gray area where you never know until.
Yeah, but then that's already the answer. Don't touch the unknown. Like security is such a conservative industry, and it makes sense because like the new stuff is exciting, but usually a bit dangerous. Like because we haven't fully understood it yet. Like
yes, but like I mean two things to reply to this. So first, like by definition, unknown unknowns. So you never know what's behind this. So you can always try to weigh up the pros and the cons, because you basically want to weigh the pros of like taking a chance compared to the benefit you can get. But since you never know what can be the cons, the drawbacks, and it's always tough to. I honestly I don't have the answer. I guess none of us.
That's over my pay grade as well.
But it's. I mean, by definition, it's a gray area. So I don't have much. I don't have any strong opinion on this. Maybe you do.
So as far as the largest threats, are we worried about nation states? Are we worried about malware? Are we worried about phishing attacks? The largest attack vectors in terms of like monetary damage done, number one is phishing. Number two.
What is phishing?
Phishing. So. Yeah. So yeah, like giving fake transactions that, visiting a scam site looks like you're signing the real transaction. And number two, I believe is smart contract hacks. Number three, which is severely overlooked, I think, by the industry, is malware. And so personally, I feel like these are, and it depends. Like some situations, nation states are definitely like the biggest threat. Like certain countries where governments are like very much your enemy. But yeah, so it depends on like what countries we're talking about. I think overall though, our number one focus should be on phishing, which luckily there's been a lot of developments lately, and like I think most wallets are now including like phishing protection. Smart contracts. Definitely we need audits for those, and the tools are getting better in formal methods. And number three, malware, though, I think there's a severe misunderstanding in the industry in terms of like best practices. It's very easy to ignore malware in a threat model because like the whole point of self-custody is you're generally going to have somewhere where a device can be compromised and you can be forced to sign a transaction. Like even if you're using a hardware wallet, it's going to be a lot harder with a hardware wallet. Even if you're using a multi-sig, we've seen cases with Radiant Finance, with Wazer X, where people were using hardware wallets with multi-sigs and malware still got them. so it's very interesting, like the best practices are not really that best practice. Everybody's like, okay, just use the hardware wallet and multisig, you'll be fine. And it's like, well, actually malware works a little differently than that.
Yeah, so that being said, we often take for granted the infrastructure layer. However, I would say with the emerging layer 2s, layer 3, 4, everything that you see, it's just, I would like just to also highlight the fact that it's also important to look at that part of the scheme and to also deep dive the security of that. Because since we have developing applications on layer 2s, privacy, as we mentioned, we can't just say that smart contracts are the main entry points. Also, we have seen a new attack vector, which is with the emergence of ZK protocols, the smart contract have somehow a power on the protocol. So it's a new attack vector which hasn't been seen before. So yeah, I would just highlight on that. I don't know how much you work on these topics.
I don't work on this topic specifically, so I won't be able to answer. But so I'm lucky here to be with amazing security researcher. I'd like to ask you questions, especially if you're like very technical. So one recent attack vector we have seen in France in the recent days, weeks, is the good old ranch attack, where somebody was kidnapped. And so my question is, so we are moving to a world, so this crypto world is pushing to a world toward the individuals, where the individual is in charge of its own fund security. Some people you meet at a crypto conference are like crypto rich, I would say, and they like boast about it. And so we have this new vector attack. What do you think of this as a crypto security researcher?
Like, I don't know if this like counts as a good answer, but I think it's different in a very fundamental level of like the complexity of the problem, I would say. Like in computer science, we define problems to be in the similar sets based on their complexity analysis. And like, even though they do very different stuff, they can be of the same family. And like, I think a smart contract attack and like an old DDoS attack are at some point in the same level, because in both of them, like, we have a software and we know the software to be working in a very specific deterministic way. And somehow this deterministic way was not properly designed so that someone actually like take advantage of. But in the terms of an malware attack, like in an infra level, or like what you say, the band, like which attack you said, like I forgot the word you used, but like this attack of attacking people in their actual own lives, you know, ranch attack, yeah. I think that that's in a very different level, like, because there the system is broken in the essence, and it doesn't work as we have imagined anymore. It's not deterministic anymore. It's like chaotic. We don't know what will happen. So like, I don't think as people who are dealing with security, which I'm not one of them, but like people who are dealing with security, I don't think that's a concern, because at that point you can't actually fight against that. It's the same for the infrastructure. You know, you can design the best wallet out there, but if the browser is like it's not giving you enough tools to actually secure your extensions, then you can do nothing. So I think that's like a similar level. I don't know if that like counts as an answer.
Yeah, I need to oppose a bit. I mean, I see your point, and like I think formally like is correct that we are then in a chaotic system. But like historically, like what we've seen in like big banks, all the like corporate world, is they have so very strict measures on operational security, on who can do what and when, like who gets into the building, who gets into the second floor, who gets into the third floor, and so on and so forth, right? Now, with multisigs and so on, and I think like the most complex version of a multisig would be a DAO, like that votes, right? And the DAO, the voters, usually vote based on token ownership. Now these can be transferred. So now you have a organization that maybe needs to be as secure as a corporate, but they all can lose and gain their membership of that corporation in 0 time. So does that mean that they all again should live in bunkers, or like how do we make DAOs operationally secure? Like what's a good operational practice for DAOs? And that does not only matter for the DAO, but it also matters for everyone who's exposed to, for example, the stable coins that DAOs produce, and so on and so forth. Like the exposure to DAOs and their operational security in the Web3 space is massive, and I think it's totally overlooked. And I think we need to take the physical world into account. Like we cannot think cybersecurity without physical security.
So yeah, focusing on the security of DAOs, how to increase the operational security of DAOs, great topic to talk about. However, in this case, like I think there's and this is not to discourage from the discussion of that topic, which could be like a next topic to talk about because it's cool. In this particular case, the Ledger employee who was kidnapped, he, you have to start off as a DAO. If you start off as a guy and then turn into a DAO, someone can still kidnap you and start just mailing fingers until you're convinced to pay people off. And the issue is that there are similarities between this and, for example, Pavel Durov being arrested in the Le Bourget airport, which led to Telegram issuing a lot of more acceptances of law enforcement requests because they publish them on their website. You can see the upward inflection of that right after the arrest. And all of this goes down to the fact that it's indeed a human element. At some point, you have to be more judicious about how you run your life. And a lot of the smartest people that I know in cryptography or basically in anything maybe in life are very private about their lives. They don't really speak a lot about what they're up to. They don't have social media accounts. Unfortunately, some of us may not reach that, wise or judicious conclusion until later in life. And by that time, we're already so invested in X or whatever that we don't really follow on that. But it might make sense to look at it as maybe like a question of personal philosophy, and that does put it in a different realm. But if you end up being the CEO of Telegram, that's a series of choices that you've made. And if you end up being the CEO of Telegram and also decide that you're going to go with your girlfriend on a trip in your private jet and also land in Paris and have fun and all over the place and post videos on Instagram of you engaging in hunting trips and so on, it becomes a question of looking at the entire personal philosophy that a person has, and that makes it apparent that you can't really relate that to security. It becomes a very personal set of questions.
I mean, you can take all the precautions you want. You can even not be on social media. If somebody wants to find your personal data, it's super easy to. So in any case, yes, it is.
No,
it is actually. We've
if you're a nation state attacker, yes, but if you're a private individual, not really.
It is actually. Yeah, it is actually. We've discussed this. Carolina mentioned Sweden to be. You can maybe elaborate a little more about this. I would bring afterwards a bit of what I have in mind, but just maybe begin with this.
Just a clarification that in Sweden there is data. There are data online about all the citizens, about their where they live, their wages, all
In Sweden, I can go on a website and type someone's name, and I will get their address and salary.
Yes, because they consider it as transparency. This data is gathered by private companies, which are allowed to do that.
My imagination was not active enough to include such a scenario, so that's on me.
Yeah, and just another example to go on this direction. In Norway, the government published the names of and holdings in bitcoins of the top 500 Bitcoin holders in the country, and so in Norway. Yeah, I don't know the number exact, but the top people owning Bitcoin and how much Bitcoin they owned. And so like, I don't remember exactly the number, but like 2, 3, 4 of them, they saw people trying to kidnap and take their Bitcoins.
And like even like with Mika now, with all the data you need to provide, like just imagine if there's a leak. Like there have been leaks in many, like, so many times, including Ledger. Sorry for the push. I mean, a few years ago. I mean, again, that's not a. It happened to basically a lot of even big companies. Yeah. So basically, it happens. Those things happens, and very personal data are easily in the space in the air. So yeah, even if you're super, if you don't have social medias, even if you don't really showcase anything, if somebody wants to find somebody's info, it's not the hardest to do.
I may have miscommunicated my point. I just think that on the personal level, the types of attacks that people are vulnerable to are so different in kind. At the personal level, for example, you need to start considering political attacks, which are this entire class of depressing sort of this whole world of sadness and misery that people have to like keep in their minds. And if that becomes part of the conversation or part of the consideration, it changes the entire meaning of threat modeling or operational security, because it starts involving not only relationships, but also like what people think of you, right? Which is like, personal relationships, yes, can be part of the threat modeling in terms of traditional security. Am I going to get a keylogger installed by the maid? The classic evil maid attack, which has that name and has been studied for like 1 million years. But what does someone think of me attack is like, that's a completely different abstract. And how can you possibly integrate that into a discussion on security? That's completely a new level, I think.
And like, to sum up, I think it all comes to the point to like ask how many points of security should we have, because like in the end, blockchains are not secured by proof of stake or proof of work or anything. The hardness always comes from the social consensus, and like something wrong can always be taken back by the consensus if there's enough people actually convinced to do so. And I think that's like really important point, because like that's actually the least security point that we can create in terms of the count. In Ethereum, for instance, like it comes to a point where anything can be changed backwardly in time if everyone agrees so. So like I think that's a very secure model in some sense, because you can secure a lot of stuff. It's as secure as like banks, controlling all your transactions at some point. But then like maybe it's bad, because then if there's a vulnerability in the system, then it will be affecting everyone at the same time at once. So I think maybe that's the question to discuss. Do we need multiple systems in the world where attacking someone is hard because there are a lot of different stuff that you need to do, and maybe you can steal their money, but you can steal their house, and like you can steal their house, but you can still, you get me? Or do we need only 2 or 3 systems that we know working really well, like a very good hard wallet, a very good ledger, and like a very good, smart contract system, ZK proof system, and like everything is controlled by one only private key and one ZK proof system that are not broken ever? Like which one is a better model, you think?
The whole idealism behind this whole thing that has been going on ever since before even the Satoshi paper, even when people started implementing end-to-end encrypted secure messengers, is that the custody is in the individual. We are giving, like, that's the cypherpunk movement even. Like that's back when the original authors of the Cypherpunk Manifesto wrote that. And then we had secure messengers, which, made it such that we had we had PGP, and then we had like private email, where you had the private key on your device, and secure messengers, where you had that on your mobile phone. And then Bitcoin, where you had the wallet, the private signing key became, and then elliptic curve cryptography made it easier to have smaller signing keys, so people started communicating them as personal addresses and identifiers and so on. And so I think that it's pretty set in stone that even people who don't maybe even know it or think about it or are new in the field, they are at a subconscious level at least looking at this whole thing as being an individual empowerment thing, where the individual has full custody. And what's pushing, in my opinion, things towards being more having a centralized authority as the custody started with KYC, because you needed them to do KYC, which has its own line of legitimate arguments and is good and whatever. Like it's a thing that we can talk about. And from there, it became a question of aiming for convenience, the same way that, you know, because of IPv4, we needed to have VPNs, and like IPv6 adoption is slow. And, you know, also because having your own wallet locally can take a terabyte, you know, and a lot of sync time for some protocols, it might be better to have Coinbase handle your wallet for you. Also, there's an app and it looks nice and it's blue and you can click on big, easy buttons. And so in that case, it makes it more fun and easy. But still, like, all of the new innovation that's coming along is still innovating with the original purpose in mind, which is the individual is the endpoint, is the one that has full custody. And like whenever Vitalik, for example, talks about what Ethereum is supposed to be good for, like he's always focused on use cases, always focused on funding these initiatives that you know, make Ethereum useful for login or whatever. Like you know, he's focused on, he wants the boring stuff to work. You know, similar to how, for example, Bill Gates famously focused on toilets in Africa for like a decade, instead of moonshot projects like Wi-Fi, hot air balloons and stuff like that. And so I think that is very like ingrained in the culture. And so I don't know whether it's worth discussing, because it's so hard to change, I think, at this point.
What is interesting is that at one point, what you learn at school is that to have good security, you need to have separate digital identities. And where the problem starts is when you start to connect all these identities together, and you can't have different identities. And on the other hand, you always have this colleague that wants to have all his life attached to one passkey, so that he just remember this passkey and he could enter his home and go to work and do all these things. So this is more user-friendly mechanism. However, your question was which model would be the best. Having also multiple layers of security can be interesting, but when I think, for instance, of one hardware wallet that I will not cite, but who has 4 secure elements, but the 4 of them are all the same. So if you crack one, you crack the others. This type of models maybe is not the best. So you need to think of a model that is strong enough, but which also is enough user-friendly. Otherwise, people will just don't do it. We work in security, but so we like to talk about security. But if you go to a standard company, people from corporate security are the boring people. They force you to change your password every month, do like all these stuffs, and it's not always well perceived. And so I think there is a balance to have, so that people apply the good practices, and that security can work.
Yeah, also a question related to that, also because you talked about Vitalik. What do you think of the current Ethereum roadmap and like implementing ZK versus not implementing ZK at the protocol level?
That's a great question. Yeah, thank you. Because like you know, I'm from Mina, and I find the current not roadmap, but like idea of roadmap is really close to Mina's actual working in terms of consensus. Basically, they make the state transition function a ZK proof, so that an aggregated ZK proof, so that any change made to the state can be reflected as a one single ZK proof that doesn't change in size or in verification time or in generation time. So you have the genesis and you have the first block. It takes one zero knowledge proof to go from there to there, and it takes one zero knowledge proof to go from genesis to like block X. So it doesn't get bigger in time. And personally, I find this a very strong model, because it actually makes this decentralization of system independent of number of blocks that you have in the blockchain, which we call as a succinct blockchain. As far as I know, this was first proposed by Mina, and like I think that's the first and only working implementation of it right now. But I think in the future we'll see this much more. Yeah.
I think we all agree on this. I think we all think it's end game, but to me, it's just a matter of distributions. It's like just not too late, but like it's just too late to. Okay, why does Bitcoin or any Ethereum made its way the way it is? Because nobody paid attention at first. Like when it first came out, it was not cannibalized by the VCs, by the private investors. So nobody cared about the tokens, and so it naturally, organically spread it out, and just it was distributed to basically everybody. So you have that's why you have an amazing distributions. But we have been through this time a long time ago. Not every single interesting project is being cannibalized by the VCs, by the investors. So the distribution will never be the same as the genesis of Bitcoin and Ethereum. But I mean, at least I agree, and I think a lot of people agree on this. The ultimate end game is having a L1 that is ZK that prove itself at each block. But again, it's just a matter of distribution now, and you cannot have the same distribution as the genesis of Bitcoin or Ethereum, because people now cares, investors in particular. But yeah, so to me it's just a matter of distributions. But I'm not sure if it's super related to security. So maybe it's a little bit out of the scope. But if you,
like maybe to come back to the security aspect, we can discuss like how this kind of a hard fork can be secured. So there's this question of like multi-sig and like how to actually implement this ZK proof, and then how to actually create this proof backward in times, because it creates a lot of computation power. So how you'll actually make sure that like the security is not broken for something that you did historically without everyone repeating the process. So like I don't have answers, but like some possible questions from the angle of security to this kind of an update. And like to clarify, I am 100% up for like having a ZK L1, but Ethereum becoming a ZK L1, I don't know, because like as Lothing said, it's super hard to actually change Ethereum's working dynamics right now. Like someone I know, it's always says it's like changing the engine of a car while it's moving. I think it's a very good analogy. Don't change the engine while the car is moving. So yeah. But maybe we can discuss from a security aspect.
I'm not even sure it's super clear for Vitalik and the foundation. So I mean, I think they're now working on clarifying the stack, but it's not it's getting a bit it's not super clear even for them.
But I didn't really get it. Is it still on the roadmap? He's publishing his big roadmap every few months, and he's very often mentioning the fact that his end game, and he takes his own phone saying, I want to verify block using this. So is it still on the? I didn't really understood.
I mean, in the roadmap, there are many things that the foundation pushes. I mean, when I say I'm not going to say Vitalik in particular, but the foundation. So a lot of things that are not very doable in a way. So it's like full dunk sharding. It's like that used to be some kind of a big step of the roadmap, and like proto dunk sharding being the first step toward this. But again, I would say it's something that is to me. I think it's officially. I'm not even sure if it's officially still in the roadmap. I would need to check this.
Maybe we should have prediction market for the Ethereum roadmap.
But anyway,
that would help a lot.
Yeah, but again, anyway, it's basically like I would say like dunk sharding or many other stuff that has being pushed in the past. It's not fully doable in my opinion. Yeah.
I know there is some research on pushing the minority clients because it's also one of the issues currently with Ethereum is that Go Ethereum Get has too many running instances, and it's a threat because it's more than 50% of the network. So there are some grants that have been given to research to universities to think of something that could be an alternative, and one of the idea, for instance, would be to implement a consensus client with a ZK engine to prove that when it interacts with execution clients that it is a minority client, so there would be like a ZK mechanism in the clients. But this is way different from the existing roadmap. But there are some experimentation. I think it's a good orientation. It will add some overhead because having to generate a proof of execution that you are running this or this type of clients that would add some delay probably. But it's a security measure that could help for the network to be more diversified, so it could be a good thing.
I think the goal of being able to do verifications locally on device is an excellent goal, even if it doesn't result in what Vitalik wants or what anyone wants, because it's so beneficial that in order for it to happen, so many things would need to improve that are things that need to improve. So, for example, zero-knowledge protocols would need to improve. Hardware execution of the sort of mathematical operations that these protocols rely on would need to improve in terms of efficiency. Probably stuff like WebAssembly performance would need to improve. SIMD performance, like simultaneous arithmetic instruction performance would need to improve on the low level. And then if you improve all of these things, you end up with an ecosystem where you can do a lot of zero-knowledge stuff locally, which is how we started this discussion, right? Like, can we do the range proofs on the phone and stuff like that? And the more local end-user devices can be empowered to handle all of that stuff in a performant way, the more that opens the discussion for us as engineers and people that are interested about privacy to think about cool things that we can do to, provide privacy-enhancing technologies and use cases. Whether or not they're related to Ethereum is another question, I think.
I'm curious about one layer or level that we don't really talk a lot about is the reputation protocol. I don't know, am I the only one who didn't see any vulnerabilities on that layer? Or even like there could be a lot of things that could be done, but I have the feeling that it's a layer that is not really well known. It's on the consensus clients to computate the reputation of the clients of the network. I wonder if there are any possibilities to improve it, to attack it. I feel like it's a topic that people don't really talk about.
I had almost forgotten about that completely. Yeah,
you didn't cite it.
Yeah, I think there are so many risks at the consensus level, and one of my favorite examples, just because I'm an economist, is economic attacks that kind of make use of fluctuations of kind of prices and exploiting correlations. So seeing token prices basically just as a financial derivative, what they are, and because we have smart contracts that can basically attack the consensus level, you can now financially engineer products that kind of make such attacks possible. And this could be an attack, for example, the long range attack, which is kind of more kind of a academic attack where you program a smart contract that then offers a reward if you submit an old expired kind of key for a node, like signature key, and that such things would work in theory. But there's also for me, for example, attacks that are exploiting liquid staking derivatives are much more a real risk. So in theory, you could have a liquid staking token, and if that just depegs a little bit, if you can get leverage on the liquid staking token, but short, not long, and make it depeg a little bit, right? Then you can get a reward from basically being slashed. And with that, reward, you can first of all hedge against slashing as a validator, which compromises the consensus. And in a very extreme case, right, if you get the financials right, you could end up in a world where you could try to be slashed to make a reward from the depegging of the liquid staking derivative. So you can make double gains, right? You can compromise the protocol at the protocol level.
How do you stake on a depegging?
How do you stake on a depegging?
Yeah, like
No, you have a financial derivative,
Okay.
and the financial derivative is a liquid staking token, and you just short that token. You engineer a financial product, like people basically bet on the depeg, and the way it totally depends on the validator set. I cannot lay this attack out now in detail because it would literally take me like half an hour. But there might be a talk on this by me somewhere online, so we might link it. Anyways, so the way it works is you basically short the liquid staking derivative, and you're a validator, so you can influence how the liquid staking derivative behaves, right? So you behave maliciously in order to get slashed, and you gain your net short position must exceed the long position of your stake, which is theoretically possible, and then that's how it would work. And these attacks are, they sound crazy, it sounds like, yeah, but that's just making it up. He wants to, publish a paper.
Yeah, I'm sure crazier stuff definitely has happened. But how would a slashing event depeg the LSD?
As I said, it totally depends on the validator set, right? If you have a slight minority, a big minority in the validator set, it won't only depeg a little bit, because the liquid staking token gets maybe it just depegs or it fluctuates a little bit downwards because not all of the stake is slashed, right? But if you have full exposure, imagine the case where it's just all one validator liquid staking protocol, a stupid liquid staking protocol, then the token would kind of collapse.
Yeah, and that's not distinguishable from a Symbol attack, though. In that case.
Exactly, and that's in that case becomes trivial. But that would be the dynamics, right? Because the people who stake with the liquid staking protocol, they have the token, and then you need a derivative on that token. So yeah, it becomes it's a chain of things that has to happen. But in the end, it's similar to kind of how the financial crisis has happened. We have derivatives of derivatives of derivatives, and suddenly everybody is exposed to debt products which have apparently no correlation. But then we recognize that if students' loans can transform into credit card loans, and if then one of the students has also a mortgage, then everybody goes bust, basically.
There could even be a scenario where the president of the United States launches a meme coin, and then his wife also launches a meme coin, thereby tanking the first meme coin. Could you imagine?
Let's be realistic, please.
That would never happen. Do we have any sort of crazy risk scenario? Jan had that scenario of LSTs depegging.
Doomer talk.
Yeah, I have a couple of scenarios in mind that I'm also very worried about. Could this be an interesting topic? One of mine is with, I think a lot of us are using multi-sigs with one front end, right? And front ends are the least secure thing. So if there's a DNS attack, if there's anything that can compromise a front end, of which there are quite a few things, then this could be very bad news for a lot of multi-sigs.
Yeah, to answer the question, I think this question of the security of front end is getting more and more important with ZK and all these technologies that are empowering the user. And that was my earlier point about the standardization of technology. It seems to me that there is two potential solutions there, maybe three. One is very accessible audit for downloadable front ends. So at some point, websites won't be serving something, but they will be serving versions of something through hashes or something, and each version is audited always. But like, I don't know if it's scalable in the long run.
So MetaMask is working on something that you might be interested in, because they've kind of found a middle ground. They created something called MetaMask Snaps.
Yeah.
So MetaMask offers you a standardized API to access MetaMask things and operations, and you write your snap targeting that API. So MetaMask is already a browser extension. That's a browser extension for a browser extension, the MetaMask Snap. And and yeah, that's one thing that I realized when I started looking at these things. And the thing is, like, MetaMask Snaps, I think I'm gonna like kill myself if I audit more MetaMask Snaps, because they're the most boring. They all look exactly the same, which I guess is a good thing from a security perspective, because they're all exactly the same. They're just like, there's a few parameters that are different. This one targets that blockchain. This one targets that liquid staking token. This one targets that DAO, whatever, that might be something that speaks to what you're interested in, standardization.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it's weird because it's done by one party, MetaMask, which is a private party. They're not interested in making it a public thing. You know, they're not going to reach out to their competitors and be like, adopt our Snaps API, right? But
so on our side, we have additional complexity on the front end because we need to encrypt the data. And this is not something standard on the wallets.
So you're touching on the downside of standardization, and especially too early standardization.
Yeah, I agree.
Like this is why. So my earlier, like a long time ago, I used to be really into secure messaging, and like that's why like Signal's founder Moxie gave this entire talk in Germany, I think in 2020. About why he hates standardization and never wants Signal to adopt any standard for secure messaging, even though the Signal protocol became the de facto standard, but that's another story. And so it's because it makes it so much harder to innovate. Standardization by definition implies the presence of a committee. Everything has to be done by committee. Everything has to be approved. Everything has to be, and then you have to have a new version of the standard that you have to go contact.
Isn't it possible to do very small standards like the ERC20? It's small, it's minimalist, and everybody can build on top of this.
Well, ERC20 benefited, I think, from the fact that Solidity itself was such a sort of like first mover type deal, and it was able to like sort of push through and be like the smart contract platform. Well, Ethereum was the smart contract platform since like 2016 and for a few years, and Solidity was the smart contract language, even though at the beginning it was an absolute train wreck. And then people needed a way to do tokens, and no one knew how to do a token, and so ERC20 established itself in that space. But I think that we currently exist in such a diversified ecosystem for anything that we could possibly care to standardize, that you can't go to the first mover and let them do something, because there's no first mover anymore.
So, yeah, on that topic, like for front-end mitigation, Ledger has proposed this initiative of clear signing to, like, with other companies to push this initiative to have this protocol so that the users see what they sign. This is an initiative that is going on right now, and that we are building this protocol, and we hope that there will be other parties also who will join on that. It's not a standard, but it's supposed to be a collaborative protocol that we create, and I think it's really relevant because when you sign an hexadecimal message, you don't understand anything, and it gives some credit if you can see what you're doing. Actually, it's a little help on that.
Isn't it the job of an AI to translate to the human what the hexadecimal code is doing?
Maybe.
The promise of formal methods, like you have these companies like Formal Land and Crispin and so on, and they're all working on making it such that they can analyze smart contracts to such a degree of rigor that it only does what you think it does or intended for it to do. But yeah, that research is slow, and it's a hard. We were discussing earlier how much of a hard sell it is because no one cares about math.
I mean, yeah, the difficulty with the formal proving is the difference that you have between the model and actually what is being executed.
Absolutely.
And also the fact that in this ecosystem everything is running so fast. How do you update your model all the time.
In the case, like for example, they wrote this startup called Crispin, which is actually a French-German startup, wrote a low-level Rust library that offers cryptographic primitives like SHA-2 and AES and whatever. And so they have to verify it first at the specification level, and then they have to verify the compiler that compiles from the specification to Rust, and then they have to verify that the Rust compilation down to machine code still maintains the same original formal guarantees that were at the specification level, but then you're actually working on verifying machine instructions, and is the verifier that verifies the machine instructions itself verified? And then these people are very patient.
Clear signing is an initiative, so that's when we started it on all Ledger devices, so that especially on the last ones where you have a screen, you can see from where to where go your money. You see the addresses, and also you see information about if there is a smart contract. You see if it comes from this DeFi protocol to this one. So there is a lot of work to do on identifying correctly the sources. There is what we call a generic parser that we want to develop to be compatible with all the EVM ecosystem. It takes time to have everything worked correctly, but the goal is to have something that is generic, that could be also that can work on other types of wallets, so that everybody knows what they're signing.
So the way it works is that the hardware device itself is able to, even if the hardware device is able to tell you the nature of the transaction, some like intelligent interpretation of it, like where the money's going from and to, are you losing money, even if it's like a complex smart contract call?
As far as I know, I haven't been working on this project, but you have a parser, and it just communicates with a database of information about the contracts and all the info that you need to know. And as I said, it's still being currently implemented, so I would just say you to check more about on the website. I think it's more detailed. I can talk about symbolic execution if you want.
But there, I'm not very aware of Ledger's solution there, but I think it comes to a very similar point as we have discussed before. If you actually trust at some point to give you the smart contract code and analyze smart contract code, if it's a centralized party, then there's the full centralization of this knowledge. So it doesn't actually provide any decentralized security, because again, there's some centralized party auditing the code at the time of run. And if you do this in a blockchain, it's too expensive. I don't think it's scalable in any way. So the only solution comes again to verifying in the client side. So once more, either you need very accessible audits or some way to understand that this is a code that does what it says, with very, I don't know, T is also a solution, but still there are censorship risks. So, but I think AI, maybe it was a commentary of love, but I was actually coming to that. I think AI is a very important point in terms of securing client-side executing code, but AI cannot work with custom written codes. I think we need some standards, but just to clarify there what I mean by standards, I don't mean standardizations that are so strict that anyone can go outside of them, but more rules that people do because they are too much by the community, just these. Those are called industry best practices. Yeah, best practice, exactly. And I think blockchain is missing them right now, because instead of best practices, everyone is trying to do new practices and acting as if something is better because it's new. I think that's some standardization we need.
It's what you're saying is so true that it's become part of the identity of the entire space, right? And I think that people cling to that partly because it might be a good thing. A lot of people flock to the blockchain space because it's a space for innovation. The amount of new math alone that's come out of the interest in zero knowledge proofs and anonymous credentials and OPRFs and all that is insane. And yeah, but I think a lot of people would benefit from best practices for sure. If you don't want to go straight to standardization.
But here, look, we are in Paris, France, one of the main countries in Europe, which is the land of standardization. And we have this PSAN regulation and so on. And no later than 2 weeks ago, I was talking with regulators, and to have the agreement, the PSAN agreement, you need to pass financial audits and also somehow cybersecurity audits. And there were discussions about creating registry that would be acknowledged by the AMF or ACPR, which are the French organization regulator, financial regulators. Yes, but for now they didn't agree to create like a database of approved smart contracts related to project which received the PSAN agreement, which is somehow surprising for me, because if you have given an agreement to a company saying, okay, this is a safe company, customers can use their services, you should also look to the database and say, okay, so related to your activity, you have this smart contract deployed, this one, and maybe yes, host it in an official database and saying this is how it is related. But on the other way, it's so much so far away from the unicorn custom that you describe. But I maybe we need that. I don't know.
I think it's also important to note that the like sort of, for lack of a better term, like unicorn culture attracts a lot of investment, and because investors want to be in early, and as long as it projects a image of the entire space which screams early stage, you know, and so people want to be investors before anything starts to ossify, and the image, or the vibe rather, that the regulation and stuff like that projects is ossification, extreme ossification, and that I think is a big turnoff for VCs. So that might be another thing to consider.
Maybe one thing on standardization. I don't want to go too deep into the regulatory rabbit hole, but like in Europe, it's on the horizon. I think we maybe should briefly touch base on that one. Like DORA is a regulation for financial service providers mostly, but that also includes CASPs, so crypto asset service providers and other service providers who have like financial and crypto assets. And that basically says not only they have to be compliant and have best practices in place for cybersecurity and so on, but also their service providers. And then we get into the question, like, what are their service providers? Is a network a service provider? Like, is the node operator a service provider? Can they interact with unaudited nodes? I think it's not a discussion that we're gonna have now, because it's just like there's a lot of legal uncertainty still around like who's really affected and who's not affected. But I think like in 2 years there's gonna be that discussion if like basically the whole crypto ecosystem is considered a service provider to the financial industry or not. And then a lot of the infrastructure players have to make sure that they somehow obey good practices.
But like at some point, I don't think that solves this issue with distributed code, because I think the issue is not because of like nodes or like limited sets of working groups. Because in the end, I think it's always possible to have auditors auditing those. And like from the question of who's auditing the auditor, like the trust is minimizing exponentially with each step you are taking. So I think like for every problem, there's a trust level that you can accept. And I think you pass that trust level in like 2-3 audits at max. So I think it's working. But I think the issue is more in this changing rapidly distributed code bases like front ends. They can change at any moment. There's no enforcing that you can do on the change, and like they can change in any way, so no one is forcing them to be in some specific way, and like front-end codes are often minimized, etc., so that they can even be read in browser in some meaningful way, and then like they are distributed so that anyone should need to run their own actually auditors at point of interaction. So that's why like it seems to me like that's the biggest node in this strings of like security and audits and everything, because in the end like there is no actually answer to how to make sure that something can be audited when it is distributed in its full essence.
Well, just on that, one thing that I think we don't do enough that already exists in the Web 2 is the initiative launched by Google with OSS Fuzz. It's a a fuzzer that you can implement the configuration file and so on your project, and then Google fuzz for you your project and give you the report, and then you can just fix the vulnerability. It's a very interesting way of doing fuzzing, because if you don't have the resources to do it, you just can rely on Google fuzzing your code for you. And I would find it interesting if several foundations that are maybe here make this same kind of support for the project that are being built on their technologies. For instance, a fuzzer for Solidity, where you just implement a file and it runs all the time, 24/7, and it gives you reports. I think it could be a good way to support smaller projects, projects that are only open source, for instance, or that don't have any financial incentives. I don't know, what do you think about that? But yeah, it sounds interesting.
Yeah, maybe just before we dive into the new topic, I just wanted to reply quickly. Like for us as a company, like it doesn't matter so much if the client trusts us. Like we have a stellar record. Like we haven't, like none of the code that we've audited since 7 years has ever been exploited. But that doesn't mean, huh? Yeah, so far, right, and it's in a way it's also a statistical thing, right? And at some point we even became like careful about like especially during the hype cycles, we become careful about selecting our clients, right? And then it becomes like this weird situation as well, where like the client doesn't necessarily want to have like all parts of the code covered. And then maybe they don't want to have like a pen test, and they don't want to have this and that. So they make the decisions on what they want, and also that they need in a way to diversify auditors. You cannot go all the way all the time with the same auditor. That's just not a good practice in the industry. And you know, like I think it's not the matter if do you trust the auditor. It's just like a lot of in-house decisions have to be made to have like a great security practices and to be at a stage where you can say, okay, we are secure. You cannot like fully kind of
gotcha. Just a quick thing before getting back to the point you made for you. So are you in a way, the way I see what you described, which is true in a way, it's like, do you compare this as I mean, do you see then audit firms as some kind of a reputation? You know, I mean, okay, the same way as you would trust a lawyer, like a law firm, for like being a good due diligence, forecasting the good risk, etc., etc. Of course, you cannot cover every single aspect of the risk what somebody is taking, but at least by reputation, you know you can trust the law firm because in the past he has done a good job. Like, would you do the comparison in the same way, or
I have no clues about how law firms operate.
But like in the idea, I mean, in the idea of like a law firm basically just is there to
maybe you go ahead.
So this is like I think the death of an auditing firm if it becomes something like that. Like the worst thing that can happen is that you become a stamp, a reputational stamp for code, because it means that you've lost your intellectual honesty and your whole process is meaningless. And unfortunately, a lot of the time when you're getting hired as an auditor, you're getting hired not because the client, the engineers have a keen interest in knowing whether their innovation is interesting and safe and secure and so on. It's because the board of directors wants it because they think it's important and it gives them a confidence signal that's legible to them as managers and business people, or the VCs want it as part of a due diligence thing, or they think they've done a good job and they want a blog post that says, oh, we were audited, we passed the audit with flying colors and stuff like that. And that's like a major threat to everything in the space, because it means that the incentives are being attacked for having like a a infrastructure for critical analysis of security designs, cryptographic work, code quality, internal best practices. And so we need auditing to be as far away as like a law firm sort of thing that you described as possible. And it's tough keeping it that way because you have to keep both credibility with clients. You have to know when to speak up when clients are basically being belligerent. Go ahead.
I mean, I was comparing to law firm because that's what I got from the explaining you made just before. But like, okay, so to get into this, how would you first define like what a law firm does, like when it does like some kind of a work for?
It really depends on law firms do all
No.
sorts
I mean,
of things.
what I mean is like, I mean, I know it's. I mean, me neither. I don't know much about like how law firm works. Just
be more specific with your example.
My example is like, okay, to me, law firm just is there just to answer a client's issues about like what are the risk is taking by doing whatever actions. That's the way I see a law firm.
Okay.
So that's only my point. Again, I don't have any specific insight about like how law firms works. To me, it's I just did the comparison from this aspect. You ask law firm to help you to forecast what are the risks by doing such actions because they know the law.
So I guess that's similar, but in the example of the law firm that you've given, it's much more hypothetical. Like if I do this, then that. But in the case of a security audit, you've already done the thing, so to speak, and it's the code that you've written, and we are looking at the code. Right. Just I don't want to. All of us promised to go back to your point, and none of us did. So regarding OSS fuzz, I think I would compare it to the same problem that beleaguers self-driving cars. So like Waymo in San Francisco works sometimes, but only if the road is according to the roads that the car was trained on, and only if nothing really unexpected happens, and only if but most of the time it's just sometimes the situations can be so diverse and unpredictable that the technology is still not there yet.
Sure. But if I understand well, when a project is asking for an audit, usually you first ask the project to do basic tests, pass the code through a static analyzer and do all these basics tests so that you can focus on the logic bugs mainly. So this is just part of this basic work that I think is important and that made you spend less time on things that can be automated and things that currently doesn't exist because everyone write its own fuzzing functions, and you can use Echidna over the open source tools, which are very good. But if you don't have the resources to run the fuzzing test for hours or days, you don't do it. So that's why I suggested this idea, and maybe it could help some projects.
I think acclimating developers with these sorts of helpful automated tools can be, in fact, part of developing better best practices internally. And it comes with, using these tools, but also comes with better property testing, better integration tests, better code documentation, clearer code, using a memory-safe language. I don't know.
Yeah, and again, this requires a lot of, understanding already from management that these are important tools that should be used in-house, that actually we should spend another week on testing and fuzzing, and we should, read the documentation of the fuzzer, not just press go. And I think these tools help a lot, but only if you have the right mindset at management level. And a lot of things need to happen at management level, really, when it comes to security.
And I think this is the big problem with best practices, where a lot of the best practices are just incompatible with a lot of the incentives. As a company, sometimes you want to outsource all that stuff, and sometimes you don't want to hire engineers who know security that well, who would even think about doing fuzz testing or any sort of static analysis. I think one place it might be a lot more practical, where there are incentives to increased best practices are in the consumer level.
I just want to underline how destructive that is to not like to everyone, the space, the code, the products, the auditors, the users, of course, because I really think that it's important for that process to be seen as not a stamp for hire, but rather as like intellectual honesty for hire. And that's what got me. That's why I love the space. Like I love being an auditor because I get to have critical discussions and I get paid for it. So I think that gives the service gives the space a service, especially in situations where you have a lot of innovation happening, and you need that sort of self-reflection, and you also definitely need independence. So when it becomes a stamp, the incentives are, I get paid and you get the stamp, right? That's a nightmare.
If you look at it though, people there have been a lot of bad incidents for some of the major brands, and the stamp sadly still holds.
Really?
I mean, at least they still get a lot of clients because a lot of people. I mean, I've heard people say, "Oh, you should go with this auditor. They're well known." And I'm like, not gonna name names, but this, they've had some very bad incidents. I think that on the consumer level, I think there needs to be we should make sure that people are not seeing these stamps and these these auditing firms that they've seen before. We need to make sure that these stamps don't hold as much weight because people are incentivized to learn more about their security. And I think also the whole even auditing itself, the way we think of auditing, the way consumers think of auditing, it's okay, audits have us covered. Especially with there are crazy things like SOC 2 audits in Web 2 where it's people are oh, we're SOC 2 audited, and we're and people ask you, are you SOC 2 audited? And it's that's just a recommendation. You don't even have to listen to the audit. They're just advising you. And
I know only too well that clients don't have to listen to our audits. So this is, but the thing is that I think we do have some level of natural immunity at the community level because the community itself is so innately technically curious. And of course, everything's open source. So people at some point will look at the code. And so if the audit is not critical enough, or if there isn't an audit at all or anything, people still question design decisions, especially for projects that end up mattering. And so that keeps the conversation going. And so long as there are critical, self-reflecting technical conversations in the space, that means that, at some point there will have to be a deep dive.
Yeah, and the stamps is so important also because the money that is behind, usually in the budget of a company, from the project I know, they dedicate 50 to 60% of the amount they have for audits, for the best company that I know. And so that's why it's also important, and they put it so much, they expose it so much. And that also puts the idea that we should just do more open security, open source tools. You said that the managers should be the one that are deciding if the project is about to be secure or not. But it's also the developers' role to do these things more naturally, so that it's normal to write unit tests and. Because otherwise, the project will spend always a huge amount of money, and the stamps will be so important because it's a circle problem, and if it's not curated from one way, it will continue to go that way.
Actually, what are the responsibilities of an auditor in case of a bad audit that leads to a vulnerability, an attack?
I've been doing audits for 7 years. Out of the audits that I've worked on, I remember 2 where the client came back to us and told us hey, there was this bug that you didn't find. I don't know whether that bug was exploited in the wild or not.
Or they find out, or they find them.
Sometimes they find them themselves. Sometimes they're reported.
Yeah.
But that's 2 in 7 years, and over.
Yeah, that's fine.
Either I think 400 audits at this point.
Okay, makes sense.
So,
okay, cool.
But there is no juridic contract. If something, imagine I'm launching a DeFi protocol. Yeah, I call you to audit my protocol, and then 2 days after there is a 200 million hack.
I think if you see such a contract, that would be an immediate guarantee that the auditor is a charlatan, because of course we cannot. We're not gods, right?
Yeah.
The best auditors will recommend that you do not hire them immediately a second time. The next time, you should go shop around, get a different set of eyes on the work, because different auditors will look at different things, will have different competencies. For example, like I have this guy on my team, Alex Perker, who knows way more about elliptic curves than I do. And he will find attacks on systems that use elliptic curve cryptography that I will miss. And there are other people, like we have Daniel Bleichenbacher on our team, who invented the Bleichenbacher padding attack. And so when we get something that like relies on padding oracles, he will be the person. And so like all of us might be into security, but you will have different people that are focused on different perspectives. Like if I get a secure messaging app, I will tear it apart without even thinking about it, because I've reviewed so many of them. But it's the entire product as an auditor. Again, the core, if you distill it to its core, it's intellectual honesty. That's the actual product. The rest is whatever you're theming it, Android skinning it into something. But like,
I think I think what you say is right. Like we cannot give a guarantee, and we will never give a guarantee. I think no auditor will. Like also no financial auditor does that. Like they say they look at it, they give their best. The reputation kind of speaks for them. But like I think still there's an inverse correlation that you can look at, like marketing budget of the company is not the auditing budget of the company. So if you see a company that that is known by everybody, like not only security professionals but also every retail investor and every VC, and they don't have a great record, then you always should ask yourself, like, how come? Yeah, maybe they have overinvested in marketing and underinvested in security, right?
We have covered this, and you can just switch topics. I think it's already...
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing, is that I understand what you say, because looking at one project for just several months and then switching to another is quite hard. At Ledger, we have a dedicated team, like we are 15, who looks every day at the same code that is our code, our products, and there are a lot of things to do to be at the best level of security. And even with a dedicated team that does that for years now, the Dungeon team, if you don't know, it's very, very fun. There are still a lot of new scenarios that could potentially happen, attack vectors. So we have so many things to think about. So, and when you have to do this work for several months on one specific project, it's a lot to ask. So I can understand that.
Yeah, no, I think like also like you have to take into account, I could never do that job. Like if I would look like 3 years at the same code every day, like
So what we do is that time to time we attack another wallet or another project just to diversify and to make more fun. But yeah.
No, but what I mean seriously is like a lot of auditors are very good at grasping code quickly. Like you get some code, maybe it's zombie code, maybe it's really early development, and you get that stuff and you can digest it fast and get what it's doing. And I think like that's something that an audit adds on top of the in-house team. And if you have not the in-house team, you might miss something that like auditors might also miss. Right?
And by that token, you do not want your auditor to become your in-house team. Yeah. That's why you want to diversify auditors, because then they will. You need the fresh set of eyes, right? That's the original argument for open source. You get more fresh sets of eyes on things, and so.
All right, cool. So I guess we can wrap up the discussion. It was great to have all of you, and yeah, super happy to discuss. Yunus and I, it was a very a big pleasure to have you, and thanks a lot.
Thank you.